My question, North Carolina, is can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And just imagine how many of our kids we could help. Imagine how many lives we would transform. And like anything, this is not going to be easy, and it will not happen overnight. Be determined, be hopeful, be empowered.
I was fortunate enough to live in a household where we didn't have much by way of resources. My parents didn't get to go to college, but that didn't mean that they weren't intelligent. My parents saw this flame in me, that flame that would challenge my Aunt Robbie and speak up for myself. They found a way to keep that flame lit.
I'm not gonna be here forever, and neither are any of you. And I wanna make sure that the work that we've begun and the progress we've made will continue, not just for the length of this administration, but until the problem is solved. I have seen firsthand that being president doesn't change who you are. No, it reveals who you are.
I love that the Queen put her arm around Michelle. And I believe that she said, you know, I never thought I would see this.
I'm more the storyteller. And for me, I wanted this book to read like a story because I wanted people, particularly young people, to just get lost in the journey.
Michelle Obama is now a best-selling author and a Grammy winner, thanks to her book, Becoming, which is now the best-selling memoir ever, along with the audiobook. Now both Malia and Sasha are full-time college students, Michelle and Barack are officially empty nesters, but that doesn't mean they are settling down by any means. In an ambitious deal with Netflix, the world-renowned couple are producing 7 documentary films. Their new production company, Higher Ground Productions, aims to be touching on issues of race and class, democracy and civil rights, and much more. The first of those 7, titled American Factory, even managed to clinch an Oscar nod at the 2020 Academy Awards. Their powerful voices still sound out clear, with something to say and something that needs to be heard. Obama was also asked to make a speech at John McCain's funeral, his opponent in the 2008 presidency race. He had been handpicked by Senator McCain to speak at the funeral, alongside George W. Bush.
Opinionated as ever, fiercely devoted to his friends, and most of all to his family. It showed his irreverence, his sense of humor, a little bit of a mischievous streak. After all, what better way to get a last laugh than to make George and I say nice things about him to a national audience? And most of all, it showed a largeness of spirit, an ability to see past differences in search of common ground.
Obama used this opportunity to speak out against the status of the current political climate. Though Trump was never mentioned, McCain had said that Obama did understand that some principles transcend politics, some values transcend party. Still, despite Michelle Obama's monumental success, she has still made it very clear that she will never lose sight of where she came from, the South Side of Chicago.
Well, I was fortunate enough to live in a household where we didn't have much by way of resources. My father was a working class, blue collar guy. My parents didn't get to go to college. I think each of them maybe spent a couple of semesters at a community college, but life hit them and they had to work. But that didn't mean that they weren't intelligent, highly intelligent. And that's often the mistake that we make. We assume that working class folks are not highly gifted in their own right, when a lot of times your station in life is limited by the circumstances that you find yourself in. So we were expected to be excellent. And it wasn't just my mother and father. We grew up with a very big extended family. And we lived all within a 5-block radius. I talk about how each of the children lived with an elder of some sort. We grew up with a great Aunt Robbie, who was a strict taskmaster, a piano teacher, and that was the sound of striving that I described, because she taught piano to the neighborhood kids downstairs. And I would hear all that effort coming up, all those young people trying to please my Aunt Robbie, because she was very clear about what she expected. And she expected it not just from her students, but from their parents. So I always wanted to keep up with others. So striving happened every day. But I could also challenge that, and that's one of the stories I tell. I was 4 years old when I started playing the piano with Aunt Robbie, and she was kind of a crank. And she had a particular way of wanting to teach piano. And I learned by ear, because I was upstairs. I learned the scales because I heard the music, and when I would go down, I'd start to play it. So I could progress faster in the music book than she wanted me to, which she didn't like. And we would battle it out. At 4 years old, I was like, why can't I go faster? Why do I have to play the songs in your order? She was my first combatant, and she defeated me. So I grew up with that kind of energy. You know, you had to speak proper English, and you weren't allowed to use slang, and reading was important. And that was the beauty of the energy in my family. My mother would always tell me, I'm raising adults, I'm not raising babies. So her philosophy was that we could understand a lot if she took the time to explain it. So it was never speak only when spoken to. She encouraged us to let our voices be heard. But one of the things that my parents believed was that my voice was relevant, and my opinions were meaningful, and my anger and frustration was real. And that's something that's important for parents of any socioeconomic background to realize. That was the gift that she gave me. I say that my parents saw this flame in me, that flame that would challenge my Aunt Robbie and speak up for myself. And instead of doing what we often do to girls who are feisty, which is try to put that flame out, to douse it ever just so because we're worried about them not being ladylike or to be being bossy, they found a way to keep that flame lit because they knew I'd need it later on. And to have that flame lit in a girl means that you have to value her voice and let her speak and learn how to use it with boundaries.
Amen.
Yeah. So my father, a classic example, he believed in real practical lessons. So I don't write about this, but I remember there was a time that my brother wondered whether we were rich. And instead of my father saying, no, you're nuts, look around, we live in a little bitty house in a little bitty neighborhood, what he did was he took his paycheck at the end of the month and cashed it all in ones. And then he sat us down with every bill that he had to pay. And he put money on top of each bill. You know, the rent, the gas, the car note, groceries.
Fraser Robinson suffered from multiple sclerosis, a debilitating illness that took a serious toll on his life. When she lost her father to the illness in 1991, it rocked Michelle's world. She called him the hole in her heart.
Her family was like Beaver Cleaver, that it was so wholesome, just they earned a little bit less money. But this really was an important foundation for her, and that she really loves family, loves being around family, and that family is really important to her. And that really shined through.
I didn't want to let my parents down, so I worked hard in school. I read everything I could get my hands on. I did my absolute very best on every single assignment. I did everything in my power to be a good student. I dreamed of one day going to one of the best universities in America. But despite my efforts, there were still people in my life who told me that I was setting my sights too high, that a girl like me couldn't get into an elite university. It was like these folks were trying to put me in a little box, a box that fit their constrained expectations of me. And after a while, I started to wonder, well, maybe I was dreaming too big. What if these folks were right? See, back then, I didn't know what my future held. I didn't know that I'd be accepted to a top university. I didn't know that I'd go on to get a law degree and become an NGO director and a hospital executive and eventually First Lady of the United States.
She aimed high, applying at Princeton University, where she was accepted and began her studies in 1981. 4 years later, she graduated with honors. But Michelle didn't stop there. She would go on to study and earn a degree from Harvard Law School in 1988.
Michelle went on to Princeton, and everyone knows, of course, after that, she went to Harvard Law School, and she rose to the absolute top of her field. One of the other things that comes out in the book that's very compelling is that she hated being a lawyer. You know, she'd gone to Harvard Law, she was at the top of her game, she was at a law firm, very prestigious, and she was doing all these court documents day in, day out. And she said to her mom, I hate it, I hate being a lawyer. And her mom actually tried to talk her into staying as a lawyer because of how much money she was making. It was an incredible amount of money. And she said, okay, make your money and then later do something you love. Because what an amazing opportunity. But for Michelle, she realized that she had to follow her passion, which was helping people. It wasn't producing court documents. And of course, we all know what happened.
If I had worried about who liked me and who thought I was cute when I was your age, I wouldn't be married to the President of the United States today.
In August of 1989, Michelle LaVaughn Robinson was working as an associate in the Chicago law firm Sidley Austin when she was assigned to mentor a summer intern. That summer intern was Barack Hussein Obama. Barack landed the internship off the back of his exceptional work as a law student at Harvard University. In her book, Becoming, Michelle expresses that the glowing praise that surrounded the confident young Barack seemed at odds with his easygoing attitude. He was like no one she had ever met. Despite a fluttering interest in this cool cat from Hawaii, Michelle, being career-focused, refused to date. It's safe to say that Barack had other ideas.
He was definitely pursuing her, and she had her reservations, and eventually he won her over.
Famously, the couple's first kiss is commemorated at 53rd and South Dorchester in Chicago. A quaint plaque on a rock reads, "On our first date, I treated her to the finest Baskin-Robbins had to offer, our dinner table doubling as the curb. I kissed her, and it tasted like chocolate."
She's very candid in her book about the fact that it wasn't love at first sight, that he had this distinct whiff of geekiness about him, and she saw him as being amazing and great, but not dating marriage material. I think he kind of grew on her, but rather quickly, because once they actually did have their first date, Michelle says it was almost immediate that she knew that this was going to be something pretty incredible. One of the biggest revelations in Michelle's book, Becoming, is her own painful struggle to have children. We find out that Michelle had a very painful miscarriage prior to having her daughters, and then was forced to rely on IVF for the successful conception of her two girls, Malia and Sasha. This was something she writes about in really breathtaking detail. She talks about the loneliness of, injecting herself at 9 o'clock at night somewhere with the hormone she needed, how the fact that Barack was often gone or traveling was difficult as she was contemplating the IVF and doing the IVF. She's very honest about it and very candid about her own struggles to have her girls, and this is something we never knew before. Michelle is very honest in her book, Becoming, about her and Barack's marital difficulties. She doesn't paint a perfect picture of their marriage. In fact, she actually said in an interview with Oprah Winfrey for Harper's Bazaar that, yes, I know people see us as #relationship goals, but it's not as picture perfect as it may seem. I think for Michelle, it was important to paint a more accurate, realistic picture of the fact that you have two very intelligent, very driven, very ambitious people who are trying to find a way to have a successful partnership and marriage. One of the things Michelle talks about is how her way of loving and her feeling of security was different than Barack's. Barack didn't grow up near his mother. He was raised by his grandparents, and yet he knew his mother loved him very much. For Michelle, she wanted him present. She wanted her husband around her. That's how she felt loved and secure. But for Barack, it didn't need to be that way. So I think Michelle's very honest and open about the fact that she and Barack had to find a way to love each other and also be true to themselves. And she openly talks about the fact that the pair underwent couples counseling shortly after the birth of their daughters.
Barack Obama didn't get into Columbia University right away. He actually started off and went to Occidental College in the US, in California. And then he transferred into Columbia University, an Ivy League school. But from there on, his career really soared. He would eventually get a law degree from Harvard Law, and he would be one of the editors, the first African-American editor of the Harvard Law Review. Then he continued to engage in community activity in the state of Illinois in Chicago. From there on, he became an Illinois state senator for 8 years. And he gained some experience in the Illinois State Senate, and then this propelled him to the national stage when he would become a US senator in 2004. He lived a very solitary life when he was in DC, and he didn't uproot his family to be there. But his greatest achievements weren't going to be in the Senate. And he probably knew that. He had the level of fame that really no other senator had achieved at that point, given what he had actually accomplished.
We are all connected as a people, that all of us share something, that these children right here lined up waiting for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, that I've got an investment in them even though they're not my children. Just like you have an investment in the children in the south side of Chicago who are trying to figure out whether they've got a decent education. And it's that idea that we are all connected, that I am my brother's keeper, I am my sister's keeper, that we have a set of mutual obligations towards each other that express themselves not only in our families, not only in our communities, not only in our places of worship, but also in our government.
The Obamas were a breath of fresh air, literally. And even people who were diehard Republicans, diametrically opposed to every single policy position, like my mother, loved them because she said, this is what we need. We need this kind of breath of fresh air. We need this kind of new energy to be brought into the White House.
I think it was difficult for Michelle to come to terms with the fact that Barack wanted a political career. She's very civic-minded, but she hates politics. And so she really didn't want to get into any kind of career where there would be mudslinging and all the different things that come with it. But As always, she wanted to support Barack in whatever aspirations that he had. I think she understood that he had aspirations for greatness and was capable of achieving these types of things, and that he's sort of a once-in-a-lifetime type of person, that a type of candidate that the world had never really seen before, definitely the U.S. had never seen before, and that she was going to need to support him, and that didn't necessarily mean that she had to let go of her own ambitions. It just meant, that she needed to be side by side with him and supporting him all along the way. I'm sure she was one of his biggest fans, but also one of the people that he trusted the most in terms of offering him advice.
Can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? In North Carolina, who is that candidate? I didn't hear you.
As I was looking at her, I thought she could be any one of us. She's a great mother. She's got a great education. She's about all the values that women need to strive for. So I think she'll make a perfect First Lady.
As Barack Obama's fight for the 2008 presidential election began, the eyes of the American public turned toward their prospective First Lady.
When she was originally campaigning with Barack in 2008, what's impossible to think of now is that she was thought of as a liability because of several things that she had said. She was being interviewed by reporters in early 2008, and she had mentioned, "This is the first time in my adult life that I am proud to be an American." And this really didn't play well. People didn't like the fact that she was emphasizing race too much. Then her dissertation was published when she was a student, which emphasized how difficult it would be to be an African American in a white university. That also didn't play over very well. And there were caricatures of her as this angry Black woman who was militant and was overly focusing on race. And they decided that they were going to basically give her a complete makeover, a complete image makeover, because they felt that she was coming across as too forceful. But that's part of who she was. If she wanted to defend her husband, she's a Harvard-educated lawyer, she would do it in a forceful and efficient and effective manner. But that wasn't playing across well given some of the other events that were going on at that time. And so they gave her this big image makeover, which they unveiled at the Democratic Convention in August of 2008. And it was really successful.
As I tucked that little girl in and her little sister into bed at night, you see, I think about how one day they'll have families of their own, and how one day they and your sons and daughters will tell their own children about what we did together in this election. They'll tell them how this time we listened to our hopes instead of our fears.
In her speech, and she was a great speaker, just as Barack is, she mentioned family quite a bit. She really emphasized her maternal role, and she exuded a lot of warmth. And it was really natural, this warmth.
How this time, in this great country where a girl from the south side of Chicago can go to college and law school, and the son of a single mother from Hawaii can go all the way to the White House, that we committed ourselves.
The world goes into it. And so this is really looking at things from hair to clothes to diction. People don't wake up and become Michelle Obamas. That takes time, that takes effort, and that takes an almighty great team as well to put you together.
Now you know why I asked her out so many times, even though she said no. You want a persistent president.
Michelle, Malia, and Sasha traveled the length of the country during what was a grueling campaign schedule. Delivering speeches, hosting fundraisers, Michelle did her part to support Barack, but it wasn't without its challenges.
The campaign experience was draining for all of Barack Obama's family. They were constantly on the road and having to deal with, raising kids on the road. Michelle Obama was having to give a lot of speeches, and this kind of carried on into the 8 years that she was in office, and she was exhausted. And she talked about how she was looking forward to being able to do so many things that she couldn't do before. I mean, it was something that she really gave up a lot in order to support him and for this goal of achieving something for the greater good. I mean, I think she really felt that this was something that she needed to chip in on and be supportive of, not because she really wanted to do it, that this would have been her first choice, but she just felt it was the right thing to do. I think she knew that everything, starting from the campaign to the way she adjusted her image for the campaign, to the way she kind of adjusted her image to be this new type of first lady, all of this stuff was a huge sacrifice to her. This wouldn't have been her choice. This wouldn't have been what she wanted to do. She didn't have these types of political aspirations, but I think she saw this as all part of something that needed to be achieved just for the greater good of U.S. society, political culture. Just the country at this time needed optimism and needed these types of policies. The actual night itself, there was quite a bit of optimism because Obama was going into the night with a lead in the polls by 5 to 10%. And there was a feeling that his campaign had been very dynamic and that he was likely to flip some states. So in the end, you had him winning 338 electoral votes, winning 52% of the vote, and he flipped 7 states that had been previously in the hands of Republicans. And that was significant. I think some of the most significant wins were in the Rust Belt, namely Ohio, but also Virginia, of course, North Carolina, and Florida. And these wins came out earlier in the night, and it became clear he was going to be the winner. But at election night, the electoral victory was, for many people, one of the greatest moments for them. And they probably agreed with what Michelle Obama had said earlier that year, that it was a moment where Americans felt proud. It was definitely a moment for minorities, the African American community, even the Hispanic community, that they felt that they had achieved something. It was just one of the most impressive things that the U.S. had accomplished.
Michelle Obama is famous for a lot of things, not the least of which is her enviable arms. One of the things we saw from her as First Lady was the first time a First Lady started wearing high street brands. She was wearing J. Crew, she was wearing other brands which were very mainstream. It wasn't like Nancy Reagan and her Oscar de la Renta all the time. She was mixing and matching designer labels with high street mainstream brands, which is what, of course, most women do. We very famously saw her supporting J. Crew from the very beginning, which is a very quintessentially American brand. And she wore a lot of sleeveless tops. And of course, the whole world took notice of the fact that she had such great arms. Michelle Obama's arms, in fact, were requested of plastic surgeons around the land by women who wanted to emulate their beauty, really. Michelle Obama has a great wardrobe, and the fact that she's 5'11" has incredible height and stature in which to show it off. She took risks in terms of fashion. She wore outfits that were a bit sexy and glamorous. She wore Versace very famously and looked very slinky and straightened her hair. She was not afraid to take risks with fashion, and she loves fashion, and it shows.
Ladies and gentlemen, the First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama.
I think what a lot of people who know Michelle Obama say about her is she's hilarious. She has a great sense of humor, and she's really funny. One of the great dynamics between Michelle and her husband is there's a friendly competitiveness. They are famously competitive with each other. A friend of mine who was actually at the 2004 convention when Barack's keynote speech thrust him into the national spotlight just before he went on stage, Michelle gave him a big hug and said, "Don't screw it up, buddy." So Michelle has a very famously competitive, very kind of funny, competitive relationship with her husband. And in her book, Becoming, it's really remarkable how much shade she throws at her husband, where she talks about his whiff of geekiness on their date and other things that make him seem very human.
I think for Barack and Michelle's children, Sasha and Malia, growing up in the White House probably wasn't easy. They had some advice from the previous first children, the Bush twins, Jenna and Barbara Bush. They actually took them under their wing and gave them a lot of helpful advice. But one of the things that made it easier for them was that they had such a strong family. They had their grandmother living with them. They had their mother ensuring that, they're able to live as normally as possible. And something that is notable about those 8 years for them was that there was never anything negatively reported on them, ever. And it could be, the media was, exercising some caution there. But even since they have now, become younger adults and are no longer living in the White House, they have earned a reputation for just being really solid, well-behaved girls that have been really raised well. And a lot of this has been attributed to the work that Michelle had done in the White House, but also Michelle and Barack as a family, just ensuring that they had some level of stability and normalcy, in spite of the fact that they were living in very abnormal conditions.
Earlier today, as you heard, Malia and Sasha and I visited the Long Room at Trinity College. As you know, I don't know if many of you have been there, it's like Hogwarts. As Sasha pointed out, it's a huge room with shelf after shelf full of books. Beautiful place, and I hope that all of you aspire to go there, if not study there, but just to go and experience what it's like to be surrounded by so much history and so much power. And the girls had the chance to explore those shelves and trace their iris and lineage, which was a very powerful thing to find out that these girls that were born on the south side of Chicago can trace their roots back here to Ireland, way back to the 1600s. That was very powerful for me as their mother, and hopefully it will be something that they cherish for the rest of their lives.
One of the things Michelle is best known for is the fact that she's an incredible public speaker. And some say that she's even better, or let's say as good as her very famous husband. Michelle and Barack were actually quite competitive about their speeches. When Michelle was prepping to give her 2016 Democratic Convention speech, which is the very famous one where she says, "When they go low, we go high," Barack heard her in one of the rehearsals and ended up going back to his notes to work a bit harder to make sure he was as good or better than his wife. Michelle is a famously good public speaker. She has great presence, she has great authority, and at the same time, she manages to be interesting and relatable. It's one of her best skills.
It's hard to believe that it has been 8 years since I first came to this convention to talk with you about why I thought my husband should be president. Remember how I told you about his character and conviction, his decency and his grace, the traits that we've seen every day that he served our country in the White House. I also told you about our daughters, how they are the heart of our hearts, the center of our world, and during our time in the White House, we've had the joy of watching them grow from bubbly little girls into poised young women, a journey that started soon after we arrived in Washington, when they set off for their first day at their new school. I will never forget that winter morning as I watched our girls, just 7 and 10 years old, pile into those black SUVs with all those big men with guns. And I saw their little faces pressed up against the window, and the only thing I could think was, what have we done? See, because at that moment, I realized that our time in the White House would form the foundation for who they would become. and how well we managed this experience could truly make or break them. That is what Barack and I think about every day as we try to guide and protect our girls through the challenges of this unusual life in the spotlight.
Barack and Michelle Obama had an excellent relationship throughout the presidency. I mean, any relationship is going to be tested when you're dealing with high levels of stress. And so it's not to say that their relationship didn't experience some bumps and some tense discussions along the way, and they've admitted that. But they see themselves as a team. They see themselves as much stronger together than apart, and they really respect each other. They see each other as equals. And I think during the entire presidency, they were able to weather a lot of storms, difficult storms that he faced, just being president and all the attacks he faced. They were able to weather this together, and their relationship is probably stronger as a result. But it's really one of the few political marriages that was just completely scandal-free. That was really about a deep love that they shared for one another. That wasn't really about a marriage of political convenience. And, both Republicans and Democrats alike would have to acknowledge that this was a very solid relationship. It was a model relationship, and one that a lot of other people could learn from.
Michelle Obama is famously tactile and warm, and we've seen that over and over again. But in 2009 at the G2 summit, there was a faux pas heard around the world when Michelle actually put her arm around Queen Elizabeth. Everyone was shocked because this is a firm break with royal protocol. Michelle and the Queen had actually been having a bit of a giggle because they were both talking about how uncomfortable their shoes are. Queen Elizabeth apparently complimented Michelle on her Jimmy Choos, and Michelle confided that they were incredibly uncomfortable, and Queen Elizabeth said apparently hers were as well. And they had a bit of a laugh, and Michelle put her arm around the Queen, which caused gasps, which could be heard around the world.
I love that the Queen put her arm around Michelle. And I believe that she said, I never thought I would see this. So you know what? Hey, I loved it. I know people got crazy and she touched the Queen, but she didn't melt. She didn't disappear, Now, I'm sure she doesn't want a whole bunch of people touching her, because I don't want a whole bunch of people touching me, okay? So I figured that it's the protocol does not change, but every now and then, I think something happens where she goes, I'm gonna mark this occasion. I'm gonna mark this, and no one will ever forget this. I just wanted to tip my dread to her. I thought it was the most marvelous thing I'd seen.
The thing is, Queen Elizabeth seemed to like it. There was a stage later on where Queen Elizabeth invited Michelle to sit in the back of her Range Rover with her on the way somewhere. And when Michelle hesitated, the Queen said to Michelle, have they warned you that you can't do this? And when she said yes, the Queen said, rubbish, you can sit wherever you want. So it seems like, despite the fact that everyone in the world freaked out that Michelle put her arm around Queen Elizabeth was in fact charmed, very much so, by Michelle Obama. We saw the very famous friendship that developed between Michelle Obama and George W. Bush, a very unlikely pairing. But what happened was Michelle was invariably always seated by the former president, George W. Bush, at funerals, public events, and they got to become friendly. George Bush very famously gave Michelle Obama a cough drop, which was at John McCain's funeral, and everybody saw that. And actually, Michelle said it was an old cough drop. It had been there a long time in the bottom of Laura's purse, but she took it, and they became really firm friends. There's a lot of photographs of them at events where she has her arms around him, embracing him. And she has said, I don't agree with him on everything, but I have so much love for this man. George W. Bush has said, she likes my sense of humor, and anyone who likes my sense of humor, I like them immediately. I think one of the things Michelle has done so beautifully is to show that friendship and warmth does not have to stop when you come to different political views, the red and the blues, the Republicans and the Democrats. It doesn't have to be a barrier to good conversation and goodwill and good relations. And her friendship with George W. Bush has really embodied that. Michelle Obama has said over and over again, I can't ask something of our children, of our future generation, that I don't embody myself. This has fed into the way she acts all the time when it comes to campaign tactics, when it comes to personal relationships, and when it comes to the way that she speaks about her political opponents.
It was clear to the world each and every day that the Obama administration held office, that the Obamas, as the first family, shared an unparalleled love and closeness.
Michelle Obama is incredibly close to her mother, and she always admired her mother. Her mother was always there for her, at home cooking every meal. And she had a really, really idyllic upbringing. And this close-knit family, in some ways, it was something that Barack Obama lacked because his parents had split up and he moved around quite a bit. But I think that the decision for Michelle's mom to move into the White House with them illustrates how close they really are, how much Michelle relies on her mom to support her and to just be there for their daughters and to provide the family a foundation and some normalcy. The media even nicknamed her the first grandmother. So I think some families, having your mother-in-law live with you wouldn't be ideal, but that, you really don't understand how close this family is and how supportive, she is to their daughters, but also to Barack and Michelle.
And I've seen it again and again and again, that what our parents told us really is true. That if we get our education, we can do anything. We can lift up ourselves to heights we could never imagine. We can pay forward all of the love and support that our families have poured into us. And we can truly be builders of a new day. That is your work.
One of the things Michelle did, which was unusual, was that shortly after she moved into the White House with her girls, she moved her mother in. Mary Ann Shields Robinson became the first grandmother of the White House. For Michelle, she knew she was going to be unavailable to her girls sometimes, whether she was accompanying Barack on a trip overseas or she had meetings. And she wanted someone she knew and trusted to help her raise her daughters. As busy as she got, she never took her eye off the ball when it came to raising Malia and Sasha. And I think moving her mother in was something that families do, but it's not typically something that first families do.
Michelle? Girl of the South Side. For the past 25 years, you have not only been my wife and mother of my children, you have been my best friend. You took on a role you didn't ask for. And you made it your own, with grace and with grit and with style and good humor. and made the White House a place that belongs to everybody. And the new generation sets its sights higher because it has you as a role model. You have made me proud, and you have made the country proud.
Hello, everyone, and may I say for the last time officially, welcome to the White House. Our glorious diversity, our diversities of faiths and colors and creeds, that is not a threat to who we are. It makes us who we are. So don't be afraid. You hear me? Young people, don't be afraid. Be focused. Be determined. Be hopeful. Be empowered. Empower yourselves with a good education. Then get out there and use that education to build a country worthy of your boundless promise. Lead by example with hope. Never fear.
If Michelle Obama came to you in 4 or 8 years' time or whatever and said, Ambassador, well, Mr. Barzum, do you think I should...
I hope she would say Matthew.
Matthew, as friends. Maybe I should run now. The Democratic Party needs me. Could you see that happening?
Well, two-part. If in that hypothetical, I guess I'm not supposed to really answer hypotheticals. It's such a happy and fun one. I would be thrilled. Although my boss, her husband, went on the record a few weeks back, sort of categorically ruling out her desire to run for public office. So I don't want to.
We heard that from Hillary Clinton a few years back.
Well, okay, I don't want to preempt my boss, but I am a huge fan, and I think that is not unique to me. Many Americans from both parties, people around the world, certainly I hear it a lot in the United Kingdom. And when she came here for that visit with the Mulberry School for Girls, I mean, she is an incredible, powerful leader, and I'm a big fan.
I want to close today by simply saying thank you. Thank you for everything you do for our kids and for our country. Being your First Lady has been the greatest honor of my life, and I hope I've made you proud.
Thank you.
The political landscape of the United States has shifted dramatically since the days of the Obama administration. But nonetheless, the impact of the work achieved by First Lady Michelle Obama has remained alive in the many hearts and minds she worked so hard to inspire.
There's tremendous nostalgia for the Obamas. I mean, look what the U.S. is dealing with at the moment. It's just complete government disarray, investigations, disunity, polarization. It's very stressful for most Americans today in dealing with the current administration. And this is even though the U.S. economy is actually doing fairly well. As a result, you know, a lot of Americans are really nostalgic about the Obamas. Those that were probably a little bit too critical of the Obamas, either on the left or on the right, at least recognize that it was a period of direction, of calm, prudency, where the U.S. could say that they were a world leader, that they held some moral high ground. And I think as we move on into this new era, a period of politics that is more polarized than ever, you're seeing the need for a type of chief executive who can comfort people, who can unite people, who's articulate, who's educated, who knows how to say the right things in the right moments, and doesn't try to divide us. You have someone who is incredibly ambitious, successful, hardworking. She balanced this with also being very maternal, very warm, very caring, very real. She was very civic-minded, but hated politics. She was very authentic, very frank and honest, had a very strong strength of character, very strong moral character. She was assertive when she needed to be, but she was also savvy to know when she needed to take a supporting role. She had a very wholesome upbringing, and she carried that on into the White House, ensuring that her kids had this same type of upbringing, albeit how strange it must have been to be growing up in the White House. She was a rock for Barack. She was one of the most popular first ladies in U.S. history.
The most important thing for you to do is to be able to pick yourself up when you fall, because most of life is falling. And the real challenge is, how do you get back up?
First Lady was never a role she expected, but no one can say it wasn't a role she made wholly her own. Her continued popularity is evidenced by the international success of her autobiography, Becoming Michelle Obama. She is testament to her ethos of self-love, hard work, and family. That an African-American girl from a working-class background on the South Side of Chicago can become one of the most important and magnetic voices of the 21st century.
I mean, part of the way we understood people and developed empathy was really because our parents had a keen sense of people and context and human behavior.
I don't know if she wrote this, but she didn't have a whole lot of boyfriends. He knew. And so I was like, I can't take him to play with me. I play with real dudes. And she said, come on, please, don't you have some guys you could take him with? I'm like, all right. So I take him to play. And to make a long story short, this is what he did. He shot the ball when he should have shot it. He passed when he should have. He didn't call fouls all the time like some of you guys do out there that I hate playing with. But most of all, he didn't just pass me the ball because I was Michelle's brother. And that told me a lot. That told me a lot about him as a person. So I reported that back to Dad before I told her. And that helped sort of grease the skids for him to come on in.
Those kids would be drinking kegs. I hadn't heard about a keg until I got to Princeton. And then you'd smell it every weekend, all up and down the hallway, just beer everywhere. We weren't really drinking beer. Black kids just wanted to dance. They wanted to party, maybe do a little something. But everyone went on. Yeah, he didn't know what that was. Yes, he does.
I'm a good kid.
We're going to go to the next slide.